You know, every day I'm more and more reminded of the quote from The Dark Knight about how you either die as a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Well, that quote kind of describes my feelings towards Star Wars and how it went from being a hero to a villain. Now, some of you might think you're being hyperbolic, you're overreacting, and I'll be honest, I don't care. And frankly speaking, I don't care about Star Wars anymore as much as I used to. Right? I could go into how I loved it as a kid and I grew up watching the original trilogy on Spike and as well as the prequels, and while the prequels are bad movies, I still enjoyed them. I remember watching the early 2000s cartoon of like for Clone Wars, and then the 2008, which I made a video about, talking about the chips and whatnot. Those once positive feelings I have for the franchise are kind of gone. And I won't lie to you, there was anger, right? For a time where I was frustrated and I was annoyed and irritated by how Disney was handling this property that I grew up with, right? And yet that anger and that irritation and that heat kind of just dissipated over the years. I mean, if we start from the very beginning, you had, in 2015, you had The Force Awakens, right? You have no idea how excited I was to get to see a Star Wars movie. For reference, I'm not gonna say my age exactly, but I'm in my 20s. Obviously, I wasn't, around when the original trilogy came out for the first time, and I was still too young slash didn't know about the existence of Star Wars the for the prequel trilogy until it was kind of too late. But I remember how excited I was when the trailer for Force Awakens came out, and I was like, "Holy shit. I'm going to get to see a Star Wars trilogy in my lifetime." Because remind you folks, prior to The Force Awakens, we hadn't seen a mainline Star Wars, movie since Revenge of the Sith in 2005. And because of how poorly the overall, over from an overall standpoint, the prequel trilogy was kind of viewed by the fans, Lucasfilm just kind of packed it in and said, "Ah, fuck it," and decided not to make any more, or whatever the reasoning is. I understand it was a lot of it had to do with the reception towards the prequels, and that's kind of also a part of the reason that led to to George just kind of selling off Star Wars to Disney. My thing is that excitement for Force Awakens, was unlike anything I had ever felt until that, in that moment, like it throughout that year, like seeing the first ever trailer, seeing the second one, and then waiting for that December release date, and then the excitement of like, you know, going to the movies and knowing that you're on the line for getting to see the newest generation of whatever's being brought to the cinema for Star Wars. What is the next story being told? Look, The Force Awakens I thought was okay. Like I still enjoyed it, and I think I was writing off of the hype more than anything else. That's why I came out with positive experiences with that movie, right? I think it's probably the least offender of the sequel trilogy as a whole compared to the other two, which I will get into. I was excited, right? Me and my best friend, we were both excited for, we thought that we had a good experience with with Force Awakens, and we went, what's next? Right? Because we were like, the end of The Force Awakens had teased Luke, and we were like, oh, we're gonna get to see, you know, um, Luke Skywalker again. We're gonna get to see him on the screen. We're gonna get to see Mark Hamill, and hopefully we'll get to see, you know, Leia and Han and Luke all together in the same room for the first time in, I want to say, up until that point, like 30, 40 years. Then came The Last Jedi. Look, I'm gonna be honest. I remember watching that movie and having very mixed emotions coming out of the cinema. And this is my thing. I didn't know how to explain why I felt the way I did about that movie, and there were things about it that didn't make sense to me. Then I came across Dun 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 Mauler and his video series going into depth and ripping it apart, rightfully so. It was an example of having all my kind of doubts and all the things that I kind of, all these mixed feelings I had about the movie, and seeing somebody take those thoughts, lay them out, and explain them to me, and I went, this is why I didn't like this movie. My best friend, if I remember correctly, he was a little bit more hopeful about the movie, but he came to kind of the same realization I did, along with a lot of other people, that this movie was really fucking bad. And the distaste, the horrific taste it left in a lot of people's mouths cannot be easily like wiped away. And quite frankly, the state of the Star Wars franchise kind of reflects that, and hasn't really moved on from, the blowback that The Last Jedi caused. Now, I know there are going to be people who claim, or at the very least make the argument, that no, it wasn't a bad movie, you're just overreacting, this is just a different kind of spin within Star Wars, it's what got me into this franchise, because nothing prior to this interested me. And again, I've always said this, if you like that movie, as much as I may disagree with it, if you like it, you like it. But I just can't bring myself to even entertain the thought of that movie being good. And given that my dissatisfaction with The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker was hilarious to me. Because not only did the trailer for that movie come out, I think, like 2 months, the only trailer, or at the very least, the only, like, official trailer, was, like, the D23 trailer that came out, like, I want to say 2-3 months before the film came out, and I went, wow, they have no expectations for this movie. And it was bad as well. I think it was probably slightly better than The Last Jedi, but that's not saying much. It really reflects it. As much as people may deny the impact that the last 2 movies especially had on the franchise, and again, there were 2 other movies as well that came out during that time period. You had the Rogue One movie and you had Solo. I'm going to give my thoughts on those 2 briefly. Rogue One was probably the best Disney Star Wars related movie. Even though, for as much as I like the Vader scene at the very end of it, there's still a little bit of issues there, because, episode 4, Leia kind of is lying to Vader, and it's just kind of like, everybody's like, seriously? We saw you fly away. So, I don't know, I have my issues with it. For as cool as it was still, there's little funky parts with it. But again, overall, like, Rogue One was a good film, and that I enjoyed it. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. It had its own plethora of issues where it kind of took you multiple kind of watch-throughs to kind of care about the characters more and more. But it was probably the closest in terms of the movies, mind you, to getting that kind of Star Wars feel. Solo was just blah. I saw it haphazardly one day on Netflix with a relative of mine. I thought it was okay. It was nothing to write home about or to, go ecstatic over. It was like, it's okay. It's okay. But given that movie, if I remember correctly, came out like a couple months in May, mind you, like just 6 months after The Last Jedi, and it struggled to break even or make back its money. And like I said, that was it. Those 5 movies is basically all that Disney has released since taking on the property. Now, is that more than, like, what Lucasfilm did? Within a time span, sure, but, look, for as much as the prequels have their problems, at least you can say they were far more coherent, and they had structure to them, and there seemed to be a story attempted to be told. Was it told well? Not really. Was it acted well? Some people acted well, some were not very good at acting. And Star Wars, that used to start out in the cinema, right, used to be this big motion picture release. It's like, Star Wars used to be one of those, like, events. Like, it used to be, like, one of those movies where you can't miss this, because that's how big the Star Wars franchise had become. Like, you talk about Star Wars, and a good chunk of people know what you're talking about, right? Even the most, like, uninterested casual person will go, "Oh, it's the one with like the light swords, right? And like the guys who can move shit with their minds, right? And or the dude in the black suit that like breathes like really weird, right? Like you there are still things about it that even people who don't care about this franchise will identify and recognize. And yet it's it's down the, it's now relegated to just streaming shows on Disney Plus. Now, I will be honest, right? And I will say this much. I don't watch the shows. Outside of Mandalorian season 1, which, mind you, I saw the first season of Mandalorian post Rise of Skywalker. And while I thought it was a good season, it was nothing to like write home about. I thought it was okay. And I thought if I can see why people like this. And people talk about this as if it's like better or the kind of the closest the franchise has come to like Star Wars. If you want to have that opinion, I don't. That's up to you. I didn't see it that way. I thought it was a good kind of Western styled television for season of television with just a sci-fi flair to it. Again, I enjoyed it. Just so people understand, I enjoyed it. Just it didn't do it for me. It I didn't even watch season 2. That's how, and I guess this is kind of the point I'm reaching towards. I have become apathetic towards this franchise, and I never thought in my life I would ever say I'm apathetic towards Star Wars. And given the kind of recent rumors and kind of confirmation almost about what the next movie will be about, I'm I'm going to be absolutely honest. I have no interest in seeing a movie about Rey being, kind of teaching her own Padawan, and Disney's attempt to kind of restart the Star Wars movies. I have no interest in seeing that. Like I said, the I made that Clone Wars video. Why? Because I like the clones, and it kind of made me come to a realization. What about Star Wars at this point do I care about? The clone troopers, and that is maybe the extent of what I care about. Outside of that, I don't know, guys. It's it's really sad to talk about Star Wars in this manner. Not everything about it is like it's not all complete like dog shit like the sequel trilogy was. If you enjoy some of the shows and if like I said, I heard good things about Andor. But do I care about Andor? Not really. Mandalorian season 2. I heard it was nothing more than character cameos that eventually will spin off into their own television shows. Well, what do we see here? A bunch of television shows that spun off of The Mandalorian. Does it suck to say all this about Star Wars? Yes. Do I enjoy being kind of harsh about it? No, not really. And, I guess I'll leave it on this note. I want Star Wars to be good. I wholeheartedly want that to be the case. I want to be excited for new movie releases. I want to be excited for television shows. You'd think as somebody who watched the Clone Wars, the 2008 version, and enjoyed the hell out of it, and that was basically like a chunk of my childhood right there. You would think someone like me would be excited for like Ahsoka. The honest truth is, I'm not. And Ahsoka could be amazing. I look, it could be the most amazing it could be the best out of all the Star Wars shows. But I don't care. Right? I'm not in a hurry to go out and watch Ahsoka. I'm not in a hurry to watch The Acolyte. I'm not in a hurry to watch any of these shows. And if the Rey movie is going to be made and it is legitimately that idea that I just told you that's what's being floated around, and it could be also confirmed as well. I am done. Look, I will stick to the clones, and that might be it. I don't know anymore. And I'm sure some of you guys may be curious as to why I'm talking about this, right? It's Star Wars. It's been talked to death already. There are plenty of people who are negative about it already on the internet. Why are you tossing your hat into the ring? I'm tossing my hat into the ring because A, I could do whatever the hell I want. I'll be honest. I've had these thoughts and I've had these kind of opinions about Star Wars. and I just wanted to share them. Because at the end of the day, I know I'm not alone. There are plenty of other people who don't want to just dwell and like in hating Star Wars. Like most people who talk about it negatively, I'm sure wish that they didn't have to. I'm sure they want to talk about it in an absolutely glowing light. But we don't live in that universe. As much as we wish to live in that universe, we do not. I wish we lived in that. But the real world sometimes doesn't go the way you want it to. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been almost 8 years since the release of The Force Awakens. Think about that. We are almost a decade out from the restart of Star Wars. And what has this franchise turned into? It is sputtered at the end.